Merry Christmas, everybody! Got a quick update of what I've been doing over the Christmas break. C3PO has gotten assembled. Well, after I put them together, I found that there was a lot of gaps that had to be filled. I used some of the red putty to fill the gaps, and then I gave him a coat of black primer and found that he needs a lot of cleanup too. Since this is a recast, there's an awful lot of bubbles and mistakes in the casting, so I've started to sand this to get it down a little bit. Then I'm going to give it another coat of primer, and then I'm going to go through and polish. Since this is going to be painted with alclads, any little scratch from the sandpaper is going to show up. The other thing that I've done, as you probably could see with that piece, is I have carved off all of the molded in wires on his tummy. I didn't like the way it looked. I thought that even with dry brushing, it's still not going to look right. So I ground them off, and then after grinding them off, I took my pin vise and I went through and I made a bunch of small holes for the replacement wires. The replacement wires are going to be made out of guitar strings, 4 different sizes of guitar strings that have been cut and bent to approximately the right size. Now, that's not going to be fun to find in the couch later. Thankfully, I found it. Yay! I'm going to do most of the painting before I put the cable in, the guitar strings in. The reason being is I plan on painting the guitar strings separately. I'm going to paint his belly black. I'm going to leave it the flat black of the primer, and maybe give it a little bit of texture. But then I'm going to tape that off, leaving an edge. If you can see, I don't know if you can, how well you can see, this is pretty thick in here. I'm going to leave that primer black, and I'm going to tape off the edges, so just the outside covering is going to be gold, thus giving a little bit of illusion as to the idea that this is a covering over his inner workings. It won't be exactly correct. It would have been nice to have a little bit of a shelf, but you know, he's not perfect, and it is a recast, and this is supposed to be a quick fun build. Yeah, right. This is turning into an exercise in learning how to deal with alclads and some scratch building of accent parts. Once he's all painted, to go back to reference and see if all of his pistons that are on the outside controlling his arms, if those are gold or whether they're silver. If they're gold, I'll probably install them first before the alclad. If they're a different color, I will install them afterwards. So just wanted to give you an update where we're at. I am in a different location. There's the Christmas tree. And a little bit of Netflix with some research for the next build, the next generation, and a makeshift work table so that I can enjoy the family during this holiday break. So I hope your holidays are as awesome as mine have been, nice and relaxing, although I do have a bit of a cold coming on, so I don't know how that's going to work out. Might end up spending more time in bed than in the workshop. So until next time, see you later, and Happy New Year. One other thing that I realized that I hadn't put in here is when I was putting together his legs, I put a pair of high-power magnets in each of his feet and then filled it with a light coating of white glue. And once that cured, I added a little bit more, and I used some brass tubes to keep the legs straight while gluing. The problem with this concept was the 2 feet wanted to come together. The feet wanted to come together even though I wanted to keep them straight. So I had to prop some bottles and whatnot in between the legs to keep them from coming together while it was drying. And then I used CA to connect the thighs to the shins. And that worked out pretty well. That also gives it a little bit more weight towards the bottom. Still, even with all of that work, does not stand up straight on his own. He is going to require a base that has a strong magnet in it to keep him upright. Anthony Daniels has a posture that pushes his back, his torso back, and he's arched, so he's almost has to be on his tiptoes, and the feet were not molded that way. So I could either heat it up and bend it with the heat gun, or I can just leave it as is and just keep him on a base that has a strong magnet. Anyway, hi, Underlord here. A little update on C3PO. Well, after 3 different coats of primer and sanding in between each one, and even after that, this time I sanded and I still have a little bit of white spots, so I'm going to have to give him one more coat on top of that. Same thing with the legs. There's a lot of rough spots. He's kind of shiny in spots now. There's still a couple of little spots where I have to clean up a little bit more because Alclad is non-forgiving. I started working on these little things. This is the big one of all the little white metal pieces. I'll show you a picture of this. Take a look at this. Yeah, I thought you would say that. Brings me back to when I was doing miniatures. Cleaning these up was not exactly fun, but I think I've got most of them. A couple of pieces seem to have broken or need to be in line 2 different pieces of white metal. That's not going to happen. Now I just have to figure out where all of these things go. There's a couple more left here that I have to clean up. Let's take a look. It is nice to see a little bit of detail going on in such an interesting model. That's one of the bigger pieces, the one that I held up earlier. What I had to do is drill a hole for the piece to fit in, and then clean the pieces off. And there's a bunch of these pieces, and as you can see with my finger, these things are tiny. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Some of these still have the flash still on them. Most of these over here have been completed. This is the pile of ones that still need to be gone through. The major pieces of flash have been taken off, but I need to put them. Okay, so one thing you'll notice here is this piece. It's got a little spiral and a line, and I believe it goes on the other end of this piece, because these go along his arms so that they would go together like this. I don't know how well CA is going to be able to hold those, since the arm is along here and these are parallel. No, these are perpendicular to the arm. So there's not going to be any support from the arm to hold these together. I'll try and glue these together, but I'm not believing that this is going to hold together very well. And then there's this other one. Here's the other arm. And I mistakenly took a little bit of the wire off of that one, so it's a little shorter. See how this one has a little piece sticking out? This one no longer has that, because I thought this was going to be the restraining bolt that would normally go in here. But apparently this model doesn't have the restraining bolt. This is before the Jawas get a hold of him, or after he's been cleaned up. That's it for today. It's New Year's Eve. It's about 11:15. I'm going to go watch New Year's Rockin' Eve without Dick Clark. Very sad. Anyway, Happy New Year, everybody, and see you next time.